you're all having a great day. Today we're going to get back into our very basic Bible study. We're in the book of Judges, and today we're going to be in chapter 9. Remember in chapter 7 and 8 we saw how Gideon defeated the Midianites, and subsequently Israel had peace in the land for 40 years. But when Gideon died, his family was not treated well, and the country immediately sank back down into idolatry and the worship of idols. And so we're going to see the result of that now in chapter 9. Verse 1. And Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and spoke to them and to the whole clan of the household of his mother's father, saying, Now Abimelech's mother was a concubine of Gideon. A concubine could have children and was part of the family, but was not equal to a wife. They had less rights and privileges, and I would imagine that Abimelech was probably frowned upon by his brothers from these other many mothers that Gideon had, which of course God doesn't approve of anyway. But because his mother was a concubine, he was probably looked down on, and there was probably some resentment there. So let's see what happens. Speak now in the hearing of all the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you, that 70 men, all the sons of Jerubbaal, rule over you, or that one man rule over you? Also remember that I am your bone and your flesh. He's saying basically, it appears to be a lie, that the 70 sons of Jerubbaal were ruling over them, when actually Gideon had said, neither I nor my sons will rule over Israel. God will rule over Israel. Now they continued to be judges. They would resolve disputes and things like that. But so he's kind of using some rhetoric here to make out like they're ruling. And maybe they did have some authority that people resented. I don't know. But at any rate, he's saying, would it be better for you to be ruled by them or for one man? And oh, by the way, remember, I'm a blood relative of yours. And his mother's relatives spoke all these words and on behalf in the hearing of all the leaders of Shechem. And they were inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our relative. Very powerful thing in those days, and even still today in the Middle East. I met a fellow that was with a contingent that was going through some training in the U.S., and he was the equivalent of like a sergeant. But he was more knowledgeable than even the officers that were around him. They would come to him for advice and answers to questions. But he said, I'll never be anything higher than a sergeant because of my family name. Families were relegated to certain jobs and positions based upon their name and their lineage. And you can see that here, that this family issue was a really big deal. And they said, we would prefer to have Abimelech rule over us. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver from the house of Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless fellows, and they followed him. So he's hired some men who they have nothing to lose. They're bums and unscrupulous men, and so they're going to follow him. Kind of sounds like politics in the world today, doesn't it? Verse 5, Then he went out to his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. Now in this whole chapter, the name Jerubbaal is used instead of Gideon. Don't know why, but remember this is the name for Gideon. But they killed 70 of his sons. It was some kind of public execution. It might have even been some kind of pagan ritual, but at any rate, he murdered them all. Back then, it was not uncommon for someone to kill relatives so that their power wouldn't be threatened. But in this case, it's most likely he just did it out of revenge because he hated his brothers. But one of the brothers, the youngest, hid himself and escaped. And all the men of Shechem and all Beth Millo assembled together, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the pillar which was in Shechem. Now when they told Jotham, he went and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted his voice and called out. Thus he said to them, Listen to me, O men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. He's probably on a hill or side of a mountain with an outcropping, speaking down into a valley. If he spoke loudly and carefully, many thousands of people could hear him. And here's what he said. Once the trees went forth to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, Reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, Shall I leave my fatness with which God and men are honored, and go and wave over the trees? Then the tree said to the fig tree, You come reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, Shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit, and go wave over the trees? Then the tree said to the vine, You come reign over us. But the vine said to them, Shall I leave my new wine, which cheers God and men, and go to wave over the trees? Finally, all the trees said to the bramble, You come, reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, If in truth you are anointing me as king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, may fire come from the bramble and consume the cedars of Lebanon. Now this story he's telling is basically trying to make a point. There's a little bit of debate over what the point is here, but clearly he's saying, for somebody to rule, they've got to give up a lot of time, a lot of effort, and their productivity is going to suffer. So it's a sacrifice for somebody to rule, and so many times people that are productive and providing things that other people can use don't want to become ruler. They're hesitant to do that. So many times, worthless people that really don't produce anything seek to rule. And a bramble, when it says here, I'll be your king as long as you gather under my shade, a bramble has no shade. It's just a thorn bush. Very little shade there, but there is risk of fire. Even the farmers back in those days realized that if there was fire, these bramble bushes would just go up very quickly and endanger even their good fields. But that seems to be the point of the story, that you've chosen a bramble here, not somebody that wants to really help, but a worthless man. Now therefore, if you have dealt in truth and integrity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have dealt with him as he deserved, for my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you from the hand of Midian, but you have risen against my father's house today and have killed his son, 70 men on one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his maidservant, king over the men of Shechem, because he is your relative. If then you have dealt in truth and integrity with Jerubbaal and his house this day, rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. If you've done this thing in an honorable way, if you've treated everybody correctly, then enjoy your relationship with Abimelech. Verse 20, but if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and consume the men of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out from the men of Shechem and from Beth Millo and consume Abimelech. So he's basically placing a curse on them, saying, you did not act honorably, and this is what I hope for you. Then Jotham escaped and fled and went to Beer and remained there because of Abimelech his brother. Now Abimelech ruled over Israel 3 years. But that was enough. because people got fed up with his tyranny. We'll see in verse 23. Then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. They've had enough. In order that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come, and their blood might be laid on Abimelech their brother who killed them, and on the men of Shechem who strengthened his hands to kill his brothers. So God is going to provide a way for Abimelech to be punished, and for the men that helped Abimelech, for them to be punished as well. And the men of Shechem set men in ambush against them on the tops of the mountains, and they robbed all who might pass by them along the road, and it was told to Abimelech. Now, by robbing caravans of people, maybe charging them a fee to use the road or whatever, that deprives Abimelech of tax money and revenue, and so that's not going to make him happy. Now, Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his relatives and crossed over into Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their trust in him. Well, who is this guy? And they went out in the field and gathered the grapes of their vineyards and trod them and held a festival. And they went to the end of the house of their God and ate and drank and cursed Abimelech. So this was harvest time. They've got wine, a big party, and I'm sure he starts to boast. And the people are complaining about Abimelech because they're fed up. Then Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, "Who is Abimelech and who is Shechem that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and is Zebul not his lieutenant? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? Would therefore that this people were under my authority, then I would remove Abimelech." And he said to Abimelech, "Increase your army and come out." So he brags, "Come on out, we'll defeat you." And when Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger burned, because he was a supporter of Abimelech, of course. And he sent messengers to Abimelech deceitfully, saying, "Behold, Gaal the son of Ebed and his relatives have come to Shechem, and behold, they are stirring up the city against you." So he sent them secretly to let Abimelech know what was going on. "Now therefore arise by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall come about in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, that you shall rise early and rush upon the city. And behold, when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you shall do to them whatever you can." Well, the city is safe. Why would they come out against him? Well, we're going to see. Verse 34. So Abimelech and all the people who were with him arose by night and lay in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. Now Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance of the city gate, and Abimelech and the people who were with him arose from the ambush. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, "Look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains." But Zebul said to him, "You're seeing the shadow of mountains as if they were men. That's really nothing. Give them a chance to get down a little further." And Gaal spoke again and said, "Behold, people are coming down from the highest part of the land, and one company comes by way of the diviner's oak." Then Zebul said to him, "Where is your boasting now, with which you said, 'Who is Abimelech that we should serve him?' Is this not the people who you despise? Go out now and fight with them." So he goads him, "Go out and fight with them. You're the one that was bragging about hating them, so go on out and fight them." So Gaal went out before the leaders of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. They actually leave the protection of the city. Verse 40, and Abimelech chased him, and he fled before him, and many fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. Then Abimelech remained at Arumah, but Zebul drove out Gaal and his relatives so that they could not remain in Shechem. So Abimelech delivers a great defeat on this guy, but then Zebul drives the rest of them out of the city. Now it came about the next day that the people went out to the field, and it was told to Abimelech. So he took his people and divided them into 3 companies and lay in wait in the field. When he looked and saw the people coming out from the city, he arose against them and slew them. So now he's just killing indiscriminately everybody in the city. Then Abimelech and the company who was with him dashed forward and stood in the entrance of the city gate. The other 2 companies then dashed against all who were in the field and slew them. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and he captured the city and killed the people who were in it. Then he razed the city and sowed it with salt. Salt is a symbol of this place is going to be barren for forever. When all the leaders of the tower of Shechem heard of it, they entered the inner chamber of the temple of El-Berith. So they run into this tower for protection. And it was told Abimelech that all the leaders of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. So Abimelech went up to Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down a branch from the trees and lifted and laid it on his shoulder. Then he said to the people who were with him, "What you have seen me do, hurry and do likewise." In other words, I cut down a big branch. Each of you get one too. And all the people also cut down each one his branch and followed Abimelech and put them on the inner chamber and set the inner chamber on fire over those inside, so that all the men of the tower of Shechem also died, about 1,000 men and women. So now even the leadership has died in this fire. Then Abimelech went to Thebez and camped against Thebez and captured it. But there was a strong tower in the center of the city, and all the men and women with all the leaders of the city fled there and shut themselves in, and they went up on the roof of the tower. So Abimelech's going to try to do the same thing with them as he did with the other tower. So Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it and approached the entrance of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head, crushing his skull. You can imagine somebody up on a high tower throwing a rock. Estimates are it was probably anywhere from 8 to 18 inches across. That's a pretty heavy rock. And he didn't have his hard hat that day, or armor, so it crushed his skull. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor bearer, said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, lest it be said of me, a woman slew him." So the young man pierced him through, and he died. We've seen that other times where other men, they didn't want the ignominious death of being killed by a woman, so they would have someone kill them when they were going to die anyway. And when the men of Israel saw Abimelech was dead, each departed to his home. That ends the conflict. Thus God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father in killing his 70 brothers. So that's part of the curse completed. Also, God returned all the wickedness of the men of Shechem on their heads, and the curse of Jotham the son of Jerubbaal came upon them. So they were cursed as well. You see how the idolatry and the sinfulness that people had sunk into, where they would accept this man, this worthless man, and actually give him money to hire more worthless men. And then after 3 years, they realize, this is not benefiting us at all. And then they go on yet an even worse sinful conflict against their own people. Anyway, it's just another event in the cycle that we've said before in Judges, where the people sink into idolatry and sin. An oppressor comes on the scene. They pray to God, they repent, they turn back to him for a while, God delivers them. Time goes on and they forget about God again. They sink back into idolatry, and this is just one more event in that cycle. Well, next time we'll look at some other judges and look at the Ammonite oppression. We saw the Midianites, that's out of the way. Now we're going to look at the Ammonite oppression and what happens. I hope this has been meaningful to you and that you'll watch the next one. In the meantime, God bless. Bye-bye.